Hey, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well today. Well, what a day it has been. Certainly a lot of news stories that's coming up. Trump just had a rally in Anaheim, a lot of impressive, intense crowds. I do remember the first time where I saw him was back in 2016 in Anaheim, believe it or not. And there was a lot of riots and protests and everything that was going on. It really just seems we're at a point where a lot of things are shaking up. We've got the migrant crisis overwhelming cities, the Philly riots. We have got, just the Menendez scandal, the senator from New Jersey. Not to mention, we've got a lot of people are just passing away like crazy. You look at Dianne Feinstein, she just passed away. And it just really gets to my mind how these people are able to stay in power for so long and who in the world would vote for these people. Because I remember in California, I would rarely see anybody who was a hardcore supporter of Feinstein, the Newsoms, the Pelosi's of the world. Who in the world would support these people? It makes you think, did these people actually really win their elections? And not to mention the fact that, you've got this dirty campaign finance system. Because honestly, if anybody wants to run for senator in California, it's very, very difficult. You need lots and lots of money. You need to travel all over the state. The state is just so large. It's just so difficult. And maybe that explains why things are the way they are. But remember, the heart of this cancer, the heart of the turmoil in the state of California is obviously San Francisco. And not too long ago, San Francisco, if you look back in the 50s, really wasn't a really blue city. Now, there are reasons why these cities are blue. You can look at the labor movements. You can look at the civil rights era of San Francisco that played a big role, the hippie culture, the gay and lesbian movement that played a significant factor, and not to mention how the very high excessive costs prevented a lot of Republicans from really moving in. Because usually, when you're looking at the very expensive areas, it tends to make those areas not somewhere a lot of Republicans would want to move to. Not just San Francisco, but much of the state. We've had a lot of Republicans move to more cheaper and more affordable areas. And a lot of this is because they usually tend to want to have lots of privacy, lots of room to, I don't know, have farm animals, to raise children for lower costs, places that tend to be more religious. And I can make a totally different video about that. But San Francisco is really where the cancer of where this is all coming from. There's just no question about it. And we also had Dianne Feinstein, who was mayor. We have Nancy Pelosi. Gavin Newsom was a mayor. And, from what I know, it's just one large family. This took decades in the making. You can look at the Brown family. You can look at the Pelosi's, the Getty family. You just have a handful of families that have huge amounts of control in everything. In addition, you have the NGOs, the public employee unions. You've got the giants in the media, in the techies, and so forth. And that really has a significant impact on how the politics is run. But what I want to get to is really there should be some kind of exams or something to show whether people are competent enough to really run in these elections, to stay in office. Now, you could argue that term limits make sense, although a lot of blue states have term limits, so it doesn't really solve the heart of the problem. But I think it could really help, because once you look at Maxine Waters, Adam Schiff, you get these career politicians, Pelosi, even McConnell, not to mention here in the state where we had Harry Reid and who knows, I mean, maybe what's his name? Horsford, Lee, Titus, Masto. I mean, they can be career politicians. This shows that we really do need term limits. But I also think we need campaign finance limits. I think Citizens United needs to be overturned. It seems like back then Citizens United was something that the Democrats were fighting against, but it seemed like in the long term it benefited the Democrats, because now since like 2015 or so, the Democrats have really become the party of the large money interests. You can see how they changed their stances on corporations, on jabs. It's amazing how a lot of things people say in the right wing field were things that Democrats were complaining about 20 years ago. You kind of look at how the Michael Moore films of the 2000s and compare them to where they are now. But we really do need term limits. It's just unacceptable somebody with this health. And even if you look at Fetterman, and you look at his face, it's much different than what he was when he was on the debate stage. Just a lot of fishy things that's going on. And I think we really do need term limits. Now, condolences, prayers to the family. And, but then again, it's like, what did this woman really do for us? Was he fighting the financial industry? Was he fighting against income inequality? Like a few other Democrats? No, just mainly cultural issues, wedge issues, race, gender, as well as other things like gun control. And again, the issue is not really the guns. It's like, well, why do we even have a society that needs a lot of guns? I mean, isn't that the best thing we can really do? What causes people to be angry, to want to purchase a firearm, or even yet use a car to run over people like we saw in Charlottesville or recently in Las Vegas from those two teens? So see, these are the things we have to start talking about. But when we don't talk about it, we just get this tug of war and not much really ends up happening. And by the way, speaking of recent people who just passed away, a former North Las Vegas city councilwoman just passed away. And according to when I read the article, it says that she passed away suddenly. Now, we're seeing this happening a lot going on with younger people, disproportionately with athletes, young males, and so forth, and what's going on and why we've seen this surge since 2021. And I think you know what we're talking about because, and I'm not going to say it, but if I do, YouTube will take down this video and something changed in 2021. I think you know what I'm talking about. So therefore, we're seeing these surges, which is to say that I really don't believe the census population numbers because a lot of people went away because of it. But at the same time, we've had millions of people who were apprehended at the border. So we don't know what's our population going on. And I'm reading the comments right now. Yeah, we all know what it was. But other than that, we are really going through very uncertain times right now. It's just a lot of weird, strange things that are happening. Awareness is growing. Maybe some things are getting better, but I think that the powers that be are really pushing it. Now, do any of you know what's going on with the security outages that's happening in MGM and even Caesars properties? All these hacks that's going on. What's happening? Is this a sign for the times to come? Are they going to hack the telecommunications that we have right now? Are they going to hack the elections? What exactly is going on? Because we know that MGM, these companies are really part of the elite powers to be. We know we've seen this transformation in the last 30 years, especially since, the mob, whatever system we had left in the 80s, all this consolidation, all these oligarchs of casino giants, and they were pushing for the lockdowns, shutdowns, all the other things they've been pushing in, bribing our politicians. And then we got all these scandals and issues and everything. And we look at Jim Murren and what's this other guy, this current CEO's name? I actually have seen both of them, by the way. So what's exactly going on? There's a lot of fishy things that's happening. And there's something that's telling me they're setting things up. They're preparing. I think they're subjects to lawsuits. I think maybe they're trying to create another lockdown. I don't know. But there's just a lot of strange that's happening right now. And these are just fishy things that we were not seeing back in the day. I mean, heck, I don't even know why people want to come to Vegas. After all, a lot of these people are just coming here. They're just trying to come here to show off. They're spending money. A lot of them don't have. It's just largely credit cards. And besides, you can go to many closer casinos. I was at an Indian casino in the San Diego area, right by the border, this town called Jamul or something, and it was a lot more packed than a Vegas casino. I don't think I've ever seen a Vegas casino as packed. So it makes you think, like, why even bother come to Vegas? It's just absolutely absurd of what's going on. But I think this is really a sign to more to come. There's just a lot of fishy things. And you guys want to let me know what's happening. I think they're probably preparing a lockdown event. But obviously, now it may seem that the culinary powers that be are fighting against the casino elites. Now, we know for sure that they're not friends with station casinos because we've seen a lot of signs, and I've showed you on YouTube about it. And we know that station casinos, I think one of the reasons why they got rid of their properties is to get away from culinary. However, keep in mind, remember, this culinary union has voted with these casino giants, the politicians that they endorsed for a long time, and now they've voted to authorize a strike. Now, you can argue that this is really just a setup by the powers that be, the elites, to create another lockdown measure, just like we're seeing with the riots and everything, and they're hyping things up to create economic disaster. And we know, because we wouldn't have had these lockdowns and all these other events, these scum politicians, the Sandovals, the Sizzlacs, all these people in charge, the Reids, if it weren't for the culinary union. And we know they keep pushing identity politics. We know they pander to illegals. It's pretty likely that they're benefiting from them. We know that the border crisis, they're one of the largest beneficiaries. I guess they get cheap labor or something. I mean, look, the Vegas area has the highest rate of illegals. So we have the right to know what they're doing here. But the thing is that, and of course, we see all these problems with employment, with neighborhoods looking like the third world, schools are underperforming. The list goes on. Language barriers, money being sent abroad. Not to mention, when I speak out, they've threatened to sue me, they've blocked me, the list goes on. But are they really doing this about wages, or are they trying to create a lockdown so they can create more chaos and, I don't know, maybe create an effect for the next year's election? What do you think is happening? Because I don't trust this union. I think this is one of the most corrupt, dangerous unions out there. I want to be surprised that they are really tools of the deep state, the powers that be, ties to Soros, who knows? And they're trying to create chaos as the years goes on. Because this is a sign that's showing that the powers that be, the status quo, the establishment that runs Las Vegas and has a lot of ties to what's going on around the world, it's showing that it's not working. And we're seeing the system really start to crumble down. We're starting to see that the Las Vegas housing market is showing signs of turnover. And I know prices have fallen, but new home prices have fallen quite a bit. And of course, a lot of people don't want to buy these new homes because you see their construction defects, their HOAs, the way they look, how you get around. You always have to have a car. But anyway, that's a different topic. So we're seeing this system starting to crumble down. And this is going to get to the point is, are we going to suffer for several more years, or are we going to have some kind of reset, whether it's going to be a reset from the powers that be, or it's going to be a reset that where we rise up and we're going to restructure a lot of different things? Because I can tell you a lot of things are not adding up. Now, for one good thing, rents are coming down. There's an apartment complex nearby. It's right by the Strip. And they lowered rents to around $8.99 for one bedroom. However, they have all these other fees, and they kept pushing me to buy them or to rent one of them because they're going to give 2 months free. So it kind of seems like we're seeing some deflation. And I know we've seen the upsurge in gas prices, but I've told you this before. Nevada's gasoline largely comes from California. And we know that with the standards that they have, in addition with the refinery outages, and you can argue that they're planning to manipulate it, that's pumped up our prices. But I'm not seeing a whole lot of price spikes in food like I used to. And by the way, these price spikes weren't really all that bad. Some items barely changed, some items did not. We're really seeing the system crumble down, okay? It's becoming very uncertain. Now, I also want to ask you, what do you make about the current job market that's happening? Because I've heard a lot of instances, and I've experienced this too, where companies will hire you. You'll go in, And then over time, you see some red flags. They constantly complain. They complain about things that were not under your control. You try to ask help from your coworkers, some tips, and then they don't like it. They don't agree with what you did, the advice that you got. And they complain about stupid little things about, 1 minute late or dress code, even though they haven't told you. They complain about you working after hours and not working in work-related stuff because you're trying to, learn some things or do some errands and stuff. So I think that, a lot of employers have become very picky. And I think that the other issue is that Nevada is a state that I've noticed people can just let go people very easily. And it's so bad. And they don't even have to give you a proper reason. And this gets to the point where it's like a lot of people, why they're increasingly becoming self-employed, and they don't really want to bother with this labor market because they know that the system is incredibly, incredibly rigged, and it's just incredibly nightmarish. Okay? And so there's something that really, really has to be done about this. And I've heard a lot of people that have been let go, that have been pushed around, and these employers have really bad attitudes. They don't want to train their employees. And these are simple little things that they can teach in like 5 minutes or may take 5 hours total. Who knows? But, if we really had a good job market, if we really had low unemployment rates, the thing is the turnover rate wouldn't be this way. That's the thing that I'm trying to address. And it's one thing that we have to really talk about when these employers don't train. The pool of workers don't really improve. Okay. So I want to just let you guys talk and share your thoughts on what do you make of this job market? Why are employers so picky and pushy and letting their people go? Now, another issue that I want to talk about is illegals. Okay. Because we've seen all these apprehensions at the border. I mean, I've been critical about immigration since around 2015 and 16 now. If you could look at the first videos of my channel, I wasn't too critical of immigration because I didn't think it was a really big deal. I thought to myself, like, who would really want to come here, honestly, because, like, we have a financial crisis. We had a lot of immigrants leaving the country. But we know that over time, the powers that be, the global interests, are pushing the migrant crisis like crazy. And we know it's aimed particularly at Western civilization. Now, to be fair, they've been pushing this in the Middle East, Israel and Saudi Arabia. They've been pushing back. And not to mention, Japan and China has had issues with them as well. Okay. I've heard the saying where it's like you have majority of the countries are trying to get into the minority of the countries. I mean, heck, we've had, my aunt who's from Tehran, they've had issues with Afghans pouring into Tehran. And they've had to deport many of those people because, again, these people are not compatible. Now, I do speak the language that they speak there, and Afghans do speak some Farsi, but their dialects are so much different that it's not easy to understand. And I have met an Afghan once at the LVCA gym out in Flamingo. But anyway, that's a totally different story. This migrant crisis is just getting out of control. And I don't think we can really do at this point. I mean, we're going to have militias. We're going to have to take to the streets. We have to fight back. We're not going to have a country anymore. And this bullcrap problem has been going on for decades, probably as far back as the 1960s. Because remember, our immigration laws were changed in the 1960s. Now, of course, over time, we've had the Refugee Act of 1980. And I think that's the worst thing, by the way, that Carter did. And we've had the 1990 Immigration Act. That's the worst thing that Bush Sr. did. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I have concern supporting RFK, because his brother, Ted Kennedy, was behind a lot of the immigration, even though RFK, believe it or not, he is not supporting the open borders either. But you can see how this is out of control. We can't have this happen because we've seen what's happened in Nevada. It's been a disaster. So why would we want this happening all over the United States, pouring into Boise, pouring into Wyoming, pouring into Nebraska, pouring into New Hampshire? Because, quote, they're not diverse enough. Think about it. How can we let this happen? How can we allow this to happen to the streets of Germany, Norway? And to be honest with you, like, I don't think this country should bring a lot of people into the United States at this point. Think about it. If we bring in 200,000 people from the Czech Republic into Las Vegas, it's still for the most part going to be the same BS. I mean, they may look different. Some of you may like them, but we're still going to have language issues. We're still going to have competition for resources, jobs, housing, a lot of other things. Housing is the main reason why I think we should have immigration moratorium. We have traffic problems. Why do we need to bring more people? Oh, I know, because a lot of young women are choosing not to have children. Well, isn't it because we've had propaganda push in our schools and in our media encouraging women not to be wife material, how to be a mom? And of course, there's problems with men too, by the way. It's not just women. And hence why we're seeing so many men in Western countries are going to other parts of the world and finding wives. Because I've talked about how, of leaving the United States myself, in addition to this cultural decay that we're experiencing. I mean, heck, if they're just going to bring these illegals, I don't want to live here anymore. Forget it. And the people we're getting from these countries are not the best quality. We're just getting the bottom of the barrel. So as they lose their less desirable people, well, this country is going to lose the more desirable people here. And I still got all my investments in the stock market, even though this year and especially last year it's been quite struggling. And I can live like a king in those countries. I don't need to live in this crap show. Let's be honest here. But here's the heart of the issue that I want to talk about. That do you guys really think that this illegal situation, this migrant crisis is going to go on? Because let's talk about the reason why they come here. They come here because they can get employment, which when they get employment, those dollars have higher buying power. And we know that they cannot survive without jobs alone. Because first of all, many jobs out there, including the field I have worked in, they e-verify their candidates. So what jobs are they going to do? There's not that many, okay? And those jobs don't pay very well to live in the majority parts of the country. Unless if you have 5 of them to live in one trailer out here in Vegas. How is this going to work? We know that the bottom line is, depending on the state where you live in, they can get government assistance. And in addition to the fact, if they have a children that's born in the United States, that's what Reid talked about in 1993. And I think, by the way, Dianne Feinstein talked about birthright citizenship in the 90s as well. I have to look for that, by the way. The fact of the matter is that what we end up having is a situation where these children can get access to government programs, and as they grow up, they can get schools, they can become lawyers, defend the illegals, they can become politicians. I mean, heck, we have Selena Torres as a legislature here in Nevada. We get the whole point. So when you look at the jobs and government assistance, it all comes down to 2 things. The value of the US dollar, which they send remittances abroad to keep those economies afloat, which they're transferring our wealth, just like when we buy crappy products from overseas, just like when we have foreign investors come in and buy up our properties, or we have these Wall Street elites that buy up our properties. That's a transfer of wealth, okay? So therefore, it all depends on the value of the US dollar. But my question to you is, well, is the dollar really losing its status as a world reserve currency? Because we have all these countries in BRICS nations, they're pulling out of the US dollar. And if they're not going to trade in dollars, if the petrodollar is going to be in jeopardy, because remember, in 1971, the system really changed, right? We got out of the Bretton Woods Agreement, we got the petrodollar, and a lot of the economic problems we've had began to arise in America ever since. Think about it. So as a result, if we're not going to be trading in US dollars, correct me if I'm wrong, well, why would these migrants want to come and earn these dollars and send it abroad? And not to mention hoard those dollars and then leave the country once they hit retirement. Because that's a lot of times what they do. Hence why a lot of them don't want to even become US citizens. Okay? So how is this going to work? And if they get welfare programs, Well, let's talk about this because interest rates are skyrocketing. And if interest rates are skyrocketing, how are we going to afford the interest payments on the national debt? Because you can argue that we taxpayers are paying for that. Although there's many loopholes out there, a lot of people, whether they're low income or rich, they don't even pay a lot of taxes. So if all these wealthy people or whoever are paying for them, which doesn't really cover the whole spending, because remember, we have these high deficits that we have to spend, and there's a lot of corporate tax loopholes. The list goes on trade deals. This is how you get these budget deficits. So if we've been able to keep these budget deficits with these low interest rates for so long and rank up our national debt, and now we have these interest payments increasing, well, how are we going to pay these interest payments? How is it going to work? Are we going to raise taxes, or are we going to have to confiscate each other's assets? Now, I know the national debt is something like $35 trillion and the interest payments are going up, which many people argue that we will have to file for bankruptcy. The net assets in the United States is something like close to $200 trillion. So we might have to take those assets to pay off the debt, at least a good chunk of it. So it's kind of like, let's say I have $200,000 in assets, but I have a debt of $35,000. So that's the only way I can pay off the debt, if my income is not afford to pay the interest payments. But do you think that's going to happen? Because if it doesn't, well, it sounds like America might as well have to default. In fact, we might even experience a shutdown very soon. We've been through this storm many, many times. How long can this continue? Think about it. And this leads me to my last issue, which is about the illegals. So let's just say, for instance, the illegals are able to get jobs. They're able to get those dollars. The dollar has enough value. It remains the world's reserve currency. As a result, those jobs are going, right? They're able to make the living and they're able to get their assistance programs. Well, the other part of the equation is, will those jobs exist? Okay? That's a very good question, because if those jobs can exist and if they don't exist, well, why won't they exist? Well, let me explain why. When Andrew Yang was visiting Nevada as a 2020 presidential candidate, and I saw him, and I can show you a video of him, he said that the Las Vegas Valley has the highest risk of losing jobs to technology. Okay? And jobs are changing due to technology. Now, you can argue that the self-driving car is not coming along. Okay. But still, if we invest more in mass transit, that can have an impact on jobs. Absolutely. And we see that these advanced construction methods, such as boxable, toward the homes, if you look at 3D printing, that's going to have an impact on jobs, and it's going to disproportionately affect the jobs of immigrants, illegals, whatever you want to call them. That's going to have an impact on whether illegals can come here. And we know the Culinary Union, which they keep praising illegals, they're disproportionately affected by technology. Think about it. So what's going to happen when a machine comes in, affects their job? Think about it. I think technology will have a more impact on immigration than Donald Trump. Because if he gets in and starts deporting by the millions, which I don't think he really will necessarily. I think what will happen is he'll deport 10%. He'll end birthright citizenship, and then he'll find ways to reduce the incentives to stay in America, such as what they did in Florida and Kansas and so forth. So as a result, and I think Alabama has done that, a lot of different things, but what's going to happen is when technology comes in and affects the job market, how is this going to impact these illegals coming in? What are these people going to do? Because if we get the new jobs, will those new jobs be the kinds of jobs that they can do? Now, let's look at, the architectural field, because that's the field I've been working in. And there's two major softwares that people use to design homes. There's AutoCAD and there's Revit. AutoCAD, I think, has been around since the late 70s. Revit is a relatively new program that's been around for about 20 years. Now, you can argue Revit takes less time and it's more exciting to build a structure. So you might argue you need 5 workers instead of 6, which you would have had with AutoCAD. So the robots are not necessarily replacing your job, but technology is still coming in and having an impact on the job market. Okay. And that's one factor to consideration. By the way, but I don't know. They might keep those 6 workers because maybe they'll need less overtime pay. Maybe they'll use them for other projects. Who knows? And you might as well argue that retail cashiers aren't going away because a lot of people say that these self checking checkouts, whatever you want to call them, they're not working too well. They're vulnerable to theft. And a lot of people like myself prefer customer service. They prefer having to go to the cashier and doing it because we want to be served after all. But either way, I think a lot of those jobs are going to change. Okay. Now, you can argue there's a lot of job openings. A lot of people don't want to fill them. And we could talk about that another day because I think people just don't really want to work for somebody. They're just tired of these employers. They're tired of having to get a job and then pay the bills. It's just not what it used to be. It's just absolutely absurd. But these are just some foods for thought that you have to really consider. Now, I want to read some of the comments that was put in. And if you guys want to start putting some comments and letting me know what you think. Where I am, the companies don't train. They make people's other employees with little experience in the job training new employees. Yeah, it's just really a problem. They're not offering training. And hence, this is one of the reasons why we don't see a situation where people would work for a company for 30, 40 years and then comfortably retire. It used to be especially with these union jobs, they used to work there long term, and then all these other companies really had to compete. So it's something we really need to look into, because I don't like to work for somebody, but I could use those jobs to really become self-employed. I think, Israel needs more diversity. Well, they've had some migrants that come in. The tribe encourages non-Black women to breed with Black men. Yeah, and I've seen an uptake, and which is another thing I wanted to talk about because I was in Flamingo and Buffalo, a more nicer part of town. And I see this white woman, and she was with her mixed race child with a Black woman. And they were just walking along the street, and they were walking besides the gas station and going to the grocery store. And it's just kind of disgusting. It's first of all, wouldn't you want to be with a man who has his own car? Because I'm sure the vast majority of men have their own cars. And this makes you think in this day of age with, the apps and everything, women are having higher standards and they want guys with more money. But what we've seen is that that's not really what's happening. What's happening is that the culture pushed by the media and all this propaganda, and I can show you the photo what I saw, it's manipulating women what to like, and hence why you see a lot of women, for instance, go with men who offer them drama and chaos because they like that pleasure and entertainment. A lot of this is because, when they watch these TV shows and so forth, like Jersey Shore, Sex and the City, The Kardashians, all these television shows, Teen Mom, you name it, that manipulates what they like. And you have to really understand that, okay, what's a problem? It's none of our business. But again, what does that do to society? How is that child going to be grown up? And are these people able to take care of themselves, as a matter of fact? Now, I was thinking about saying something. I don't know. I just lost my thought. But sometimes, I've thought about just driving by, honking at them and confronting them. Because, listen, people need to step up. They used to do this back in the day. And I'm not really a guy of European descent, but it's hey, if you're a white woman or anything else and you're looking for a guy who's something different, at least go for me. At least I'm more exotic. I'm darker than a lot of other guys who are of your roots. At least I'm able to pay the bills. At least I'm not going to go violent on you. I mean, and again, if you want to say what I just said is so stereotypical, look at the statistics, okay? We know that Black male and white female relationships have a poor performance, high divorce rates, more likely the father is going to leave the household. It's just a fact, folks. It really is. And I'm just really getting tired of this. Now, that was the first one I've seen in a really, really long time here in Las Vegas. But I've noticed you see that a lot more in the inner areas, and you don't see that a lot in like the Summerlin, Henderson areas. That's one of the things I've noticed, because I'm guessing that a lot of those people, they probably have different expectations, different values, and all those other different things. And by the way, speaking of white women, from my experience, it's more difficult for me to attract a white woman than a Hispanic woman. I know. Even though I'm more compatible socially with white men, white women, it's just not that easy to attract. And I think a lot of that is, although I had a really nice conversation with a 19-year-old white woman, and it went pretty decent. She had blue eyes, but she had darker hair yesterday. Then again, I guess it's because Hispanic women, they come from lower socioeconomic levels. That tends to happen. And then also, I have similar skin color than they do, and I'm actually much taller than Hispanic men. I think that has another factor, because Hispanic men are largely Amerindian versus, the height of Persian men is significantly taller because we're largely Indo-European. So I think that makes a difference. But anyway, this whole mixed couple agenda that they're really pushing. I mean, first of all, why aren't we seeing advertisers pushing black female and white male couples? I mean, certainly I'm not necessarily thinking that dating a black woman is necessarily a bad idea. In fact, I dated a woman who was half black and half Filipina, believe it or not. So I don't think it's really much of an issue. Of course, we didn't have much chemistry in the second half of the date, but nevertheless, it's like, why don't we see that? And I think a lot of them, they go for these men, black men, is because maybe they have access to drugs or something like that, or they're being pushed by this gangster rap culture. But we really need to talk about that. And here's the fundamental thing, folks. If you are really concerned about your heritage and who you are, I would say you should start fighting against that than the border crisis. Because if you don't address the problems that's happening with your females, particularly the Nordic Anglo-Saxon women, because remember, it's like those newborn children in the Las Vegas area, they're like probably 22, 23% of the total population. And the white portion of the student population in Clark County Unified, it's like, now it's only like 20%. It's very slim, because I think a lot of white kids are pulling their kids out. They're going to private schools. They're going to homeschool and all those other things. And maybe that's a good thing, because we don't want those white kids to be under this mass madness that we have now. And hence, we see even racial differences even in public transportation. Think about that. I mean, one of the reasons why we can't solve our urban planning problem is because of the racial situation that we're in now. Because I told you before, I was in the MARTA train, and I was the only non-black in the MARTA train, but I thought it was worth using because when I was attending the 2019 American Renaissance Conference, I had to rent a car, and I wanted to go from my Airbnb to the Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. And I don't know if that's a train that Sam Dixon, who is a speaker, and I interviewed him, would usually take. But nevertheless, you see, this is the reality we live in, right? Therefore, we have to start talking about these situations, because it's really this manipulation that's ongoing, and it's absolutely disturbing. And what's really interesting is that when I see a lot of these white women who date these black men, usually they're really have low class, they're kind of trashy and how they look and how they are. And another factor is a lot of them tend to be very overweight. Okay. And I rarely see any of white women who are outside of those two who are dating these men. And that's the thing. And a lot of it is just short term, for the obvious reason why they date these men, because they're looking for, these long, I'm not going to say, because these black men have. And in fact, it's funny because I was reading an article from American Renaissance about how Persians and Arabs had characteristics of blacks. And a lot of the Persian women liked those long parts of black men. and hence why a lot of them perhaps interracially marriage, which is to say, I'm just curious to know if I have some black DNA in me, because I think I have some black DNA. My aunt was one time mistaken as a black woman, and not to mention, I might have some South Asian DNA, some Turk DNA, Arab DNA, and I might have plenty of European DNA as well. So, my aunt, who I've just talked about, she has blue eyes from my mom's side of the family. But that's largely because they lived along the Caspian Sea. So if you look at the people by the Caspian Sea, they're very European looking. So, again, diversity happens, all over the world. But anyway, I'm just going to scroll down the comments. And the tribe encourages non-black women to breed with black men. Thousands are being laid off in every field. Yeah, but I think the problem is with a lot of these layoffs is that, from what I've seen, a lot of these people are employed like for just a few weeks or a few months. They don't train them. They just complain about random BS issues and so forth. You look it down right here. I want to be served by obedient sub-Saharans. Just watch the TV commercials. It's all you need to know. Black men aren't technically men. I'm just reading the comments, and it's like, well, they do lack a lot of qualities on average that other men don't tend to have. And you're actually good looking. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the comments. And yeah, it's just a really sick culture that we're living in. So anyway, I'm gonna just wrap it up in a few minutes. You guys want to say something? Just let me know. What do you got? Some comments? Okay. Got any other comments? Anybody? Okay. I'm going to be wrapping up in a few seconds if nobody wants to comment on the live chat. Yeah, you love George Floyd. Yeah. Yeah, and we got so many problems as a result. But, I actually think that has created another awakening. Maybe that is a good thing. I think that had to happen to really address a lot of the issues and undo our past mistakes. Absolutely. I went to the George Floyd Square, by the way, and I told people how my ancestors had black slaves too. So it's just so sad what has happened to that city. And it's funny because when I was in Minneapolis, I went to a Target over there, and then one of the other Targets just that Target just closed just shortly after. A lot of these Targets are just keep closing. It's just because they're not really prosecuting a lot of the criminals there. Yeah, and I think that if you look at 2024, the polls are looking much better for the Republicans. Trump is now leading in those same polls that had Biden and Hillary Clinton 10 points ahead from Trump. So it's just really, we'll have to see how everything turns out. I mean, there might be a possibility that even that state, Minnesota, might even turn red. Although I don't know how Biden can do even better than what he did in 2020. I mean, what other state do you think might even go blue? North Carolina? Seriously? I don't think Iowa's going to go blue. I don't even think, Alaska's going to go blue. I mean, are you serious? Could Utah go blue? Think about it. I mean, Nevada got redder for 2022 than 2018. Think about that. So it's, and I know they're trying to bring these immigrants over, but a lot of polls are showing that a lot of blacks and Hispanics and Asians are moving away from the Democratic Party. It's funny because the people who are very loyal to the Democratic Party, it seems like now it's like usually just single, unmarried women, pretty much. They are more likely to support the Democratic Party especially if they have a college degree, single white women especially. And now you see why they've manipulated women to be this way. You know what I mean? So it's definitely something you got to worth looking into. Prank call George Floyd's family. Oh my gosh. It's ridiculous. You know, some of my friends are to say that there should be a statue for Derek Chauvin, and they think he's actually a hero. He should actually be given an award for what he's done. And, you know, there's a lot of good police officers. And even though what I saw yesterday, how there was kind of a disturbance where they handcuffed one of the people I know who was fighting against those pride stuff. What's his name? Spencer. He's the same guy with the megaphone. He protested against Sizzlax, the jabs. But Spencer did touch one of those people who supported those pride efforts, just to keep in mind. So I don't think what the police did was necessarily all that bad. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of good cops in Metro, and I think that we really need to support them, what they do. You know, it's like, you know, honestly, from my experience, there's only like 10% of cops really messed up. You know. Why do I think I'm part black? And that's a very good question. If I'm part black, it's probably a very tiny percentage of my DNA. And as you know, my father, southern Iran, it's a city called Abadan. Well, now Abadan, there's barely anybody living there. Now a lot of them have moved to Ahvaz. And the reason Abadan is not very popular now, because those cities were literally destroyed during the Saddam Hussein's regime, when Saddam started to attack the province of Khuzestan, because Khuzestan is an Arab province in Iran. And he attacked Iran because he wanted to prevent the revolutions from happening in Iraq. So with the war that happened, and frankly, my father wanted to move back to Iran, but because of the military conflict, what was happening with Saddam, basically it destroyed the city. But anyway, just going back to the black people, because there's a lot of black people even in southern Iraq too. In fact, they're a significant portion of the city of Basra's population. And as you know, there was a significant number of Eastern African blacks. They were coming from the Zanj area of Eastern Africa, and they were brought there to work the fields in the Middle East, particularly southern Iraq, around Kuwait, and southern Iran. And basically, they were trading slaves, and they were trading ports and everything. It was basically the Arab slave trade, as you know. So as a result, and they started trading these slaves as far back as 800, and there were rebellions. Many of them got castrated. I mean, this is the thing that we need to start talking about this. Actually, my 10th grade history teacher, who taught me AP World History, talked about the Arab slave trade. And as a result, you know, they were brought there. They started it sooner, before the Europeans, and they ended the slave trade after the Europeans. Because remember, it was you white people that talked about ending slavery. Now, I don't think we Persians were as harsh with the blacks as we were with the Arabs, because we know we Persians are not as, you know, the same kind of rebellious nature as the Arabs did. And frankly, I mean, just imagine if the Arabs, or as a matter of fact, the Japanese and the Chinese would have conquered this part of the world than the Europeans. I think they would have been worse with the Amerindians than the Europeans would have had. But anyway, you know, there is a significant black population in Iran, and they live along the Persian Gulf regions. There's a lot of them in the southeastern province of Iran, and they don't perform very well socioeconomically. And from what I know, they seem to bring a lot of entertainment, and they seem to do very well in sports. You know, very similar patterns of behavior that we find in every part of the world that sees a significant number of blacks, unless if you bring blacks in a way that come here through merit, as a matter of fact. So that's one thing you got to keep in mind. But however, I think that some of my relatives probably mixed with some of the black people, and there were some interracial marriage that actually happened. So that's one of the things that you've really got to keep in mind. And after all, when you think about it, there's a very small chunks of the world that where you have the people that are not really mixed. That's when you think about it, because you can argue a huge chunk of Italians, Latinos, people from the Middle East, people from Southeast Asia, India, they're all pretty much mixed when you think about it. So there's very few people that are pure of one race. Okay. So let me read some of the questions. Yeah, Persians are great people. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the comments, but all right, I got to go. It's been 50 minutes. I think this has been the longest I've ever done, but anyway, it's just some very uncertain times to live here. Yeah, and if you guys can kind of guide me through the job market and help me support myself, I really would appreciate it. But anyway, thank you guys so much. Hang in there. See you.